What's up, beautiful souls? It's another episode of the Spiritual Psychiatrist Podcast. Today, it's an absolute honor to have on the show the only Caucasian Master Ayahuasca Shaman I am aware of on the planet. And honestly speaking, there's a lot of shamans out there right now, but he's one that I personally just resonate with. The only one, actually, probably one of the only ones that I would actually go and do ayahuasca with. He's got a center down called Blue Morpho. So check it out. And he's been on a journey, man. And not only that, like there was a time in my life where I was going through a transition state. And I'm kind of a prick. So I don't always learn well from everybody. I really have to respect the person if I'm going to learn from them. But he actually guided me through a transition state in my consciousness. So I'm really grateful for that. And then like the words that were coming through were just resonant. Like you could tell that he's lived it, and it's coming from a place of wisdom and learned experience. So I'm really excited today to dive into this episode. We're going to talk about ayahuasca. We're going to talk about New Earth. We're going to talk about all different kinds of things. Grateful to have on the show, Brother Hamilton Sutherman. Thanks for being on the show.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sam. Pleasure to be here. And thank you for the nice, warm intro. Stoked. Thank you.
Yeah, for sure. Me too, brother. So you're kind of like a master shaman / this is my perspective. Take what resonates, leave what doesn't. But also, like on the spiritual level, I've met a lot of different quote unquote spiritual people, and the real spiritual ones don't even act like they're spiritual. So it was really cool when I met you, like the level of embodied knowledge that you were carrying. And so I always respect like what it took to embody that. And we'll dive a lot into that. But I always like to start with, we were just talking about this about, you used to be a kind of a golfer, and I'm a firm believer that every step someone takes, they're kind of preparing, and they need to go through that in order to kind of get to where they're at. So Hamilton, can you walk us a little bit through your hero's journey in this lifetime, and kind of what led you to where you are, the key moments?
Sure. Yeah. The hero journey is, I think like everyone's, quite a heroic journey. Life's not easy for anybody. Like I always say, didn't get born with a playbook or with like the dotted line going how easy this is going to be. For me, I grew up in Silicon Valley. I came from a Western medical family. My dad was a doctor and my mom was a nurse. And we were really science focused. There wasn't a lot of room for the esoteric or spiritual. And I was involved in sports and scholastics, and, it was all go, go, go and succeed and looking for that and competition and being the next best thing. And so that really fueled my life and through college. And, but along the way I was, pretty accelerated and was taking some college classes as a high schooler. And some of the class I took was anthropology. And that's a study of Homo sapien. It's a study of humans. And, at such a young age, that just throttled me, that there was this history and this truth behind humans and these other cultures and ways of seeing the world that was not part of my little high school worldview that I had been shown. And that was like my first awakening, that there was a lot more going on here than we had been shown. And then I went to the University of Colorado at Boulder and studied there anthropology and other cultures and language, and had a spiritual awakening the year after I graduated. I'd say up until that point, my life was pretty like normal in that sense, like just succeeding and looking to get to the next level, which is kind of provided to us by our families and our society. But with this like bend of loving travel and loving something that was outside the box. And so when I had the spiritual awakening and consciousness awakening, what I think now happened was I just like quickly evolved into seeing a lot more about what was going on in the world that I was kind of already involved in, but didn't have any context for. And it came with heightened psychic sense of awareness. It came with clairvoyant capacities. It came with premonition dreaming. And I now know that that's very common for everybody who has that kind of experience at any time in their life. But for me in my early 20s, I was 22, 23 years old without any kind of framework for it. It was thunderous at that time. And so I looked to psychotherapy and I looked to shamanism to explain it. And I got told by the psychotherapist that what was happening was real and I just had to accept it. And I was actually told that I didn't need counseling after 6 weeks. And then I was told by the shaman that what was happening was real and there was no way to go back and I had to accept it and I needed training. And so I got the same message from both sides. They said, you're going to have to go train in this thing and just accept the fact that you're now perceiving outside of the box. And that was really the big, change for me, 23 years old. And within 6 weeks of having this happen to me, just in normal meditation without plant medicine or anything, I started getting this clear message. You're going to go to Peru and you're going to be trained in shamanism. You're going to go to Peru and you're going to be trained in shamanism. And I didn't have any frame of reference for it. I didn't know anyone in Peru. I thought there was no way it could happen, but to just
going to interrupt you right there real quick, and we'll catch up on that. We'll pick up on that. But like, there's a lot. So in some weird ways, because I'm a board certified psychiatrist, there's a lot of people perhaps who are waking up kind of like you did and having this spiritual awakening and their clairvoyance is coming online. I'm hearing voices. And a lot of the times I would love your perspective and your take on this. In some ways, I feel like, I don't want to say lucky, but both your psychotherapist and both your shaman were like, yo, like this is normal. And after 6 weeks, you were done. But there's a lot of kids right now who are on service contracts here on Earth who the Western system doesn't allow that to happen. Like they wake up, they're seeing things, they're hearing things, they may be a little ungrounded, and they're thrown in psychiatric hospitals. So you got a little taste of that awakening in Boulder, but also what they do in indigenous cultures with these kids. And correct me if I'm wrong, but in Western cultures, we throw them into a psychiatric hospital and put them on mind-numbing medications, perhaps. And in some indigenous cultures, they understand, oh, this child has an awakening, and they train they might be a shaman. Can you take me a little bit into that? Like,
yeah, I mean, it was a wild experience because there were all these synchronicities happening, which is also common, right? It's like you're all of a sudden synced in the 4D, you're synced with time. You're not like a little fish swimming against the current anymore. And there's this like greater connectivity to everything. And so just things line up. And I'll give you an example. Like I met this lady who I had never met before. She knew my mom. She didn't know what was going on with me. And she looks at me and she goes, how are you sleeping? I'm like, when has anyone ever asked me, like out of the woodwork, how am I sleeping? And she's like, oh, I just have this strong intuition. I have to ask you. And I'm like, well, not really well. I'm having these like really intense dream experiences. I'm seeing things, some of them are coming true. I don't really get it. And she's like, oh, I have a book for you. And she goes to her car and she brings it. She goes, I'm supposed to give this to you. And she hands me a book. And it's a book on the awakening of a shaman. And like, and I start to read the book, and introduction, chapter 1 and chapter 2 is exactly what had happened to me over the previous 6 weeks. And so instead of being told, oh, you need to be on medication or something's wrong with you, or let's try to force you back inside this box, it was the exact opposite. I had been, all of a sudden awakened, just like in a traditional society where you would be taken into a traditional apprenticeship. And I was recognized in that way somehow, miraculously within our own culture, treated that way, and told within our own culture, you don't need medication, you need training. And I think that was like a miraculous moment in my life, because medication would have destroyed me. I was stone cold sober when all of this stuff happened. I was practicing martial arts. I was an athlete. I was not taking mind-altering substances. I was in a state of total sobriety. And so to be told that was key, that I needed training. And it's borderline. I mean, I understand why certain people need medication, but I also understand why not everybody on medication needs medication. Right. And there's an aspect of it of discernment as well. And I was very clear on what was this normal conversation. And I was also very clear on what was this extraordinary communication that was taking place. And it saved me. I mean, I was sent immediately to training. And then from there, I was, like I said, sent to Peru to go find the people who ultimately trained me.
Beautiful. Yeah. And I want to just kind of like re-quote one thing you said is like someone told, like, you don't need medication, you need training. And I don't think, that's for everybody, but I do think our system should allow some space for those words. You don't need medication, you need training. And so let's pick up where you left off. So you had this awakening, Boulder, Colorado. Then you intuitively are being led. You need to go to Peru, and you're gonna get shamanic training. So what happened after that?
Well, I think the second most miraculous thing was, so I'm in a meditation, just like any meditation. I hear this really clear communication that often comes through meditation that I need to go to Peru. And I say, well, I can't go to Peru. I don't have any money to go to Peru. I'm told the website I need to go to and the time I need to go to it. And if I go to the website at that time, there's going to be one ticket there that's half price to all the other tickets. And that's the one I'm going to buy. And so that actually happens. I'm like, well, I got to test it, so I go there and I'm like, this is old school. This is before like real laptops and stuff. It's just like the big brick computer. And I'm looking at it like, it's all grainy. And then all of a sudden it's like, there's the ticket. It's half price. And it allows you a 120-day stay. Like, how can this be? So I call out to my mom, do I buy the ticket? Do I not buy the ticket? She's like, buy the ticket. So I buy the ticket for a couple of months in the future, and I'm on my way to Peru. And I head down to Peru in September of 2001. And, I travel around Peru looking for this apprenticeship, and everything lines up. And I ultimately find it in the most remote part of the Peruvian Amazon, beyond native indigenous tribes. Like where I stayed, lived, and apprenticed was the furthest inhabitant, and upriver from me, no one lived. And I stayed there for the next 4.5 years.
Real quick here, because I kind of remember, and correct me if I'm wrong, before you found your resting place in the Amazon where you train and eventually train, there's a whole story behind this. And I don't want to go into all of it, but just because there's so many ayahuasca shamans, quote unquote, in the hills of LA, they're popping up everywhere right now. They're calling themselves shamans, and every little big city is like starting to do these things. But I remember, correct me if I'm wrong, but like you almost had almost like a near death experience and went through something before, or like some type of experience that wasn't so pleasant that you had to go through before you found your training grounds. Is that correct?
Many. I got taken in my first ayahuasca ceremony to the place I was going to train, but not the people. And so just to backtrack a little bit, based on what you just said about, these shamans in the hills of LA and everywhere else, the shamanic path down here is clear about what it takes to train. Just like the path to becoming a doctor in the US is clear about what it takes. And just like the path to becoming a professional athlete is clear, or becoming a PhD scientist is clear, or becoming a lawyer is clear. Like, please understand, these are not self-proclaimed titles that people down here have. Okay. First, you get called, and the calling is not yours to choose. Okay. The calling comes from something else, and it's recognized inside you, and you're said to have to be gifted. And they call that a don, D-O-N, a don. They consider it a gift from creation or a gift from God. Number one, it has to be seen in others, by others in you, not you get to say you have it. Number one. Number two, others who are knowledgeable have to see it and agree to train you. If you're not part of a bloodline or a family that does this, it's really rare to be accepted. It's like less than 1 in 100 gets accepted. After that, you start to go into training, and training typically lasts 5 to 10 years. And it's 24 hours a day. Every day, there are no breaks, no vacations, no holidays.
Wow.
During that period of time, you're going to be trained in the visionary arts, as well as the spirit arts, the mystical arts, and the plant medicine arts. The amount of plant medicine that you're going to be given is enough to try to kill you physically. And you're going to have to prove and show that you don't die. And you're going to have to rely on that gift that others saw in you to be the way that you survive. The tests will come from your own people training you in the rites of passages, and then it'll come from the society at large to make sure that you're strong enough and clear enough to be able to make it. And they force you out of it like Navy SEAL training. If you don't make it, they break you to the point that you make it or don't make it. Many people along the way go what we would call crazy or insane, and many die during apprenticeship itself. If you're lucky enough to survive all of that, Then you have to get through the plant medicine. And the plant medicine are very large doses of very frequent ceremonies continuously as they reshape and hone your psychic and psyche abilities. And they're slowly training you into being a medicine person for the society and the community that's going to know the forest, how to live in the forest, navigate the forest, find medicines in the forest, and be able to receive that from nature itself. If you graduate, right, like what would be like your undergraduate study, like just like med school, now they put you into what they call a maturation phase. And the maturation phase can last as long as the apprenticeship or longer. And so when the entire thing is said and done, you're looking at someone that studied for 10 to 20 years straight, 24 hours a day, every day. And I think that that's a big differentiator compared to what we would think of as like a psychedelic assisted therapist or a psychedelic guide or a psychedelic facilitator. I just think there's like a big difference. And the word shaman is being used to kind of cover a way to understand both groups. And I just don't think they're the same group. Not one's better than the other. There's a different purpose behind it. But for the word shaman to have real meaning, you have to go through some kind of training like that. And I was lucky enough and honored enough to be able to have that experience. But I can attest to the fact that it breaks most people and almost kills you.
Yeah, so that sounds like it's even more rigorous than even, like I went to medical school in America. That's even more rigorous. First of all, 1 out of 100 are accepted. You have to be called. You can't apply. Other people have to see it in you. You have to train 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for 5 to 10 years. And you have to literally learn and master the craft of the medicine. And then after that, you have another kind of a period. So it sounds even more rigorous. And I don't know if this is we'll go into it right now. So what is the kind of because I see this all the time, Hamilton, is like, people will come back from the Amazon or people will come back and they don't even know that they're astrally tagged. 3 months later, they're having like, oh, they have an entity. They don't even know it. Or like, all of a sudden they're suicidal and they have to they're calling me to do exorcisms or, you know what I mean? And so what is I know there's a benefit to it, like this psychedelic awakening, but like also understanding kind of the amount of time you spent with this plant is very few people I can talk to on the planet who spent that amount of time with this plant, who understands the Western world, who understands LA culture, who understands Amsterdam, because you also understand what's happening in the invisible world, goes into influence. Like, what's any perspective or thoughts on kind of this ayahuasca becoming popular in the cities, and what is the benefit? What is the dangers? Any thoughts there?
Sure. First of all, on the benefit side, ayahuasca is an incredible both psychiatric kind of plant and like psychological therapy kind of plant. It's this weird hybrid where if you listen to the anecdotal evidence of what people are experiencing, there's a specific and repeatable shift in brain chemistry. And now it's been scientifically proven that there's, balancing of serotonin in the brain. There's a new receptivity to your own neurotransmitters. There's kind of this general energetic reset that people say they experience, et cetera. And then on the psychological side, it goes into the journeys themselves. And you listen to what happens with people while they're in the effects of ayahuasca. And when it's guided by real medicine people who understand what they're doing and know how to guide it, the people go through transformational events that's very much like processing the conscious mind, subconscious mind, and unconscious at the same time. So I like to think of it as like this brief window where you are aware of all three states inside an individual, right? Now, if that's guided well, you can help somebody deal with what otherwise would be locked in kind of personality and persona fixations that they would never have access to. And so then they can process those things. Talked to someone yesterday who said they got over grief of a loss of a grandparent they didn't even know they really had. Got into an ayahuasca ceremony and unlocked all this intergenerational grief that came out of them. And it was only after that grief was gone that they felt freed from not what they thought was the trauma of losing their grandmother, but all the things holding them back in life. So it turned out that this loss of grandmother in the person's childhood that they didn't process, didn't know how to process, was actually now tied to in their psyche the difficult times and other traumas in their life. They had this like existential moment in ayahuasca, connected with the grief, with the loss of the grandma, connected with her spirit, connected in vision with her, let it all go. And with it, the blockages went as well. So you see that going on with the plant. And then there's this final piece of it that, especially for the westernized societies right now, is really important, which is the spiritual awakening or greater spiritual connection. And many people come out of the ayahuasca ceremony saying they went in not understanding spirit and they came out knowing spirit, not believing in, not having faith, knowing like, oh, there's a gnosis about this. This is a fact. I don't have to believe in this thing. Spirit is part of life. And so it's this mystical awakening to this greater understanding of spirit. Now, in Judeo-Christian mythology and religion, we see it as the Holy Spirit. In the more indigenous, they call it Great Spirit, like the spirit of the universe itself. But there's this connection to this something greater. And then after that, people live with that connection forever, which is centering, soothing, supporting. It gives them context for something greater beyond the bubble of their ego and that context of their personality. Okay, those are the positives in a general sense. If you get in the weeds of it, like some people have serious spiritual afflictions, you can heal through it with ayahuasca, but the general practitioner won't know how to do that. So those are like the general positives. Okay, the negatives, especially going into the unseen world, most people don't understand that matrix of consciousness and the matrix of spirit is highly contested and has been for a very long time. It's hot, like hot war, which is why in our mythologies, the deities are always fighting each other. It's why in our Hollywood movies, everyone's fighting each other. It's why in the spiritual traditions, they're often warring traditions. Even though they utilize these plants, they're not 100% all at peace and enlightened at all. And the things that are fighting are extraordinary. It's not this homogenized human view of like one war with another. It's like when you think of nature, consuming nature and protecting itself from being consumed. And there's all these different chemicals protecting all the plants and the insects all at the same time. And it's super diverse and it's all changing at the speed of evolution and cell division. It's like that, but in energy. And people don't understand that that's what they're tapping into. And the really long training that we're talking about and the need for it is about how to manage that part of our consciousness. And when humans drink plant medicines, they become very open to being inhabited by many of those different kinds of energies. And so now this is where you start to go into, somebody who started drinking plants and then 6 months down the road, it goes off rails and they are in a psychological crisis. And then another person 8 months down the road who says they're inhabited by entities. That's because they were not trained to deal with those kinds of circumstances and scenarios in the visionary field. And the more you work in the field and the more you work with others, the more that comes into practice and importance. And I used to say this to my apprentices. I would say, why do you care about being a master shaman? If you're not prepared on day one, that's going to happen to you. You'll be shut down on day one if you're not actually prepared to deal with what's in this quote unquote world of spirit, which just means all of the swarming energies that are part of Earth itself, that have been part of 1 billion years of the evolution of life. And from the greater cosmic sense of consciousness itself, what people call entities or light beings that are part of the field that want to be in the human body. They want the human experience, and the human body is considered a very important nexus of consciousness. They want the self-awareness associated with it. And, people in westernized cities and cultures that don't know about this are, ultimate prey for it. And those are the dangers.
Well said. And I just want to highlight that when that field opens, and I'm paraphrasing, and probably there is a battle going on in the invisible world. And when that field opens and you drink that plant, I mean, if it was my son or my, I would want him to be with a master shaman who understands that field, how to protect that field. And also, if you heard, there's a psychological, a spiritual component to it. So that, and there's a lot of entities and energies out there in the invisible world that are wanting a human body. And if your shaman doesn't know how to protect the space, if your shaman doesn't know like to understand the tides and rhythms of the ceremony, it's very possible. And I've met a lot of these people who come back and they're calling me up and they're like, they 3 months later, like some entity attached frequency matched to the primary neurological network, and 3 months later they're having symptoms. So you better make sure, if you're going to do an ayahuasca ceremony, that hopefully you research and you find a shaman who understands the invisible world, how to hold that space. And not only that, I think there was a beautiful thing mentioned here. And, there's spirits that, a shaman can work with that are either pure and only have your best interest in mind, and who follow the sacred law of one. They're not going to enter into your body. And there's also other spirits who don't follow those rules, right? So you better make sure you understand, like, who shamans work with. And I love what you said, though, like that coming out of that with a gnosis, a knowing, a cellular remembering, a cellular feeling, a felt connection to spirit. And once you know, you cannot not know. And I also love what he said about going into the unconscious. It's the stuff that we're not even aware of, that a master shaman can help hold that space for you to be able to go into that, reveal all the unconscious patterns which are causing all the symptoms and the diseases in your life, and to be able to hold that space enough on all three levels, the spiritual, the mental, and to go into that and make the unconscious conscious, and to sometimes you can be able to clear that. And that's why I started this podcast by saying, personally, I don't know any, like, for me, I'm just being honest, like I would send them to Hamilton at Blue Morpho. And that's just me right now. Like, that's what I feel comfortable recommending my audience to, is if you feel called. But I love what Hamilton said also, is it's a calling. So if you feel called, then I recommend Blue Morpho. So yeah, it's an interesting time, man, where these plants are coming out. I feel like it's the last scene of Avatar, where the plants are coming out and they're just like, okay, consciousness reserves the right to remain neutral, unless the survival of a species depends on it. And I feel like some of these plants are letting themselves be known. I want to dive into a lot of other stuff, but also I know ayahuasca is just one plant in the Amazon. And so part of your, over 10 plus years of training, I'm sure you were exposed to a lot of other plants that Western society doesn't know too much about. Can you tell us a little bit about this? I don't want to say the secrets of the Amazon, but the other plants of the Amazon, and the potential, if we could apply some of these things into Western medicine, what therapeutic potential is possible?
Yeah, well, first of all, there are hundreds, if not thousands, of incredible medicinal plants down here. I like to imagine the forest as a matrix of molecules and compounds. There's just this incredible matrix being created, and it grows out of itself and it evolves itself. So there are plants for colds, and there are plants for arthritis. There are plants for bladder issues and lung issues and stomach issues, digestive issues. There are plants that are used to help somebody's vitality, and there are plants that are used to help sedate somebody. There are ones to control inflammation, and there are other ones to support living, with less pain. There's analgesics and stuff. You use different aspects of the plant. Some are the roots, some are the barks, some are the saps, some are the leaves. They have a sap here that you put it in a wound and you stick the wound together, and it sutures the wound. And it has antibiotic principles at the same time, so it preserves the wound. They have resins for joint injuries, how to be able to, when somebody dislocates a joint, put it back in place and then wrap it in saps and different tree barks and ultimately create like a natural cast that then also has anti-inflammatory principles associated with it. The knowledge is vast and amazing. There's other visionary plants as well. There's the sanangos that are known, or sanangas they're called, and there's a variety of them. Most common ones are called chirik and uchuk sanango, but there are another variety of them, and they're used as other kinds of visionary healers. There are other medico vegetalistas who are specialists of that. There's the trees that people diet. So they're not psychoactive in their own right. They get activated by the shaman, and so you drink them. If you drink them as a normal tea, it's just like drinking an herbal tea. It has some medicinal properties, but the indigenous people learned how to literally download the spirit or the essence of the tree to be able to live within in a person. It's a phenomenal technology, and they do it through a process called dieta. And so there are a number of trees that are used in dieta. There's well over 50 different kinds of trees and plants that are part of the dieta. And, then there's also a culture here that drinks angel trumpet vine or toé, which is not recommended. It's incredibly dangerous, but it's used. And so there's a wide variety of the plants. And then there are tobacco shamans, they're called mapacheros. And for me, I was trained in ayahuasca. In the Amazon, I was trained in ayahuasca, the trees, the palos, sanango, mapacho, and toé, and the visionary plants. And then I was trained to be able to make tinctures and teas, poultices in about another 100, 150 different plants. And then I also trained in other parts of the world in Wachuma, San Pedro, and psilocybin mushrooms and cannabis, all as different medicinal plants.
Awesome. I want to delve a little bit into perhaps what might be the most misunderstood or widely abused plant on the planet, which is tobacco. Obviously, you see it in the Western culture as what it is right now. They're mixing all kinds of chemicals into it. They're distributing it in mass, and a lot of the society believes that it's like toxic, and they show like lung. Anyway, the Western culture has done what it does. But tobacco, in its pure essence, I know mapacho is one of those. Can you talk to us a little bit about the real essence of tobacco and to kind of re-educate us?
Well, first of all, tobacco is considered a medicinal plant and a spiritual plant medicine teacher. So I think the first thing we have to think about is it's a medicine, not a killer. It's used for healing. And down here, mapacho is even used to treat and heal asthma. If you could imagine, it's used to treat and heal lung issues. So I think right there, you kind of got to stop and say, how is that even possible to this propagandized world around tobacco? And first, it's about quantity of use. So when people utilize this plant as a medicinal plant, it's used sacramentally and ceremonially for the purpose of healing a condition, and it's not used again until there's another condition. So it doesn't develop dependency and addiction because you don't use it enough to develop dependency and addiction. Okay. And when you use it ceremonially, you use it in smaller quantities. And so there again, it's being used with people who are not addicted to it. And it's a very potent plant during that period of time. It's obviously a visionary plant. There are ways that it gets utilized. It gets added to plant medicines as a purgative. And so it's also said to help communicate with the other plants. And I think what they're meaning is that when it's in the brain and the nicotine receptors are activated, I think we have a better capacity than at that time to be able to be aware of the other plants inside of us. It brings a heightened sense of awareness and association associated with them. It's utilized as a form of cleansing and protection. So it's smoked, and the smoke is used as a smudge, and it's used to protect a space from this invisible, unseen world of spirits. And it's known as a repellent to the nature of those entities that wouldn't like it. So the shamans will use it in that way. When it's used in dieta and you train with it in dieta, you drink it. And when you drink it at that amount, it's purgative. And so, if it's making you throw up and it's making you defecate, it's much harder to develop a dependence on it because of the experience you're having with it in that moment. Very much like I've heard people say they smoked a cigar while they were drinking too much tequila, and then they never touched a cigar again. So there's sort of a warning, to use it that way. And then I think the final thing before I say the final thing, that it's also considered a sacred plant. And so if you treat something sacredly, that's how you shift your awareness and the way you come to the plant, right? So you make it sacred. And so it changes the way that you interact with it. Now, I wanted to do a test. And this is the final thing I'll say on it. I wanted to do a test because mapacho is a lot stronger in nicotine than cigarettes.
Yeah.
And I had people at our lodge that were smoking cigarettes. And so I wanted to do a test because I had this hunch that somehow the tobacco had been adulterated and there was something else going on, but I didn't know what it was. And so I had a cigarette smoker put down, like, have a cigarette like normal. And then when they wanted the next cigarette, smoke and inhale a mapacho. Okay. Now I had them smoke, in terms of weighted tobacco, at least 5 to 10 times the amount of tobacco. So now this is like the equivalent of smoking 10 cigarettes in terms of tobacco weight. And I had them inhale it. So they're inhaling at least 3 times the amount of nicotine of half a pack instead of one cigarette. And by the end of smoking that thing, they had a deep need to smoke a cigarette.
Interesting.
Now, how could that be possible? So that showed me that it was not the tobacco and the nicotine that they were actually needing and addicted to alone. There was something else in the cigarettes that they were now addicted to. And they needed it. They needed the cigarette, and they could not quench that need until they actually had the chemical processed cigarette. And so it just showed to me that, yes, there's a big difference here, and there's an adulteration to the plant taking place, and we don't have enough study on it to know what exactly that is. And I did it over and over again. I did the study on at least 100 people, and it was 100% needed to go back to the cigarettes.
Yeah, so it's almost like they're addicted to not the nicotine in the cigarette, but like to all the other chemicals that are being added into that, which is probably purposefully done by the companies that distribute those cigarettes. But put tobacco in its purest form, as you're saying, it's sacred. It can actually help with asthma. It's about the quantity, and it can be used for protection. Native Americans used to revere it in their most sacred peace pipe, and so I think there's a lot of kind of re-education, hopefully, that we can do around this sacred plant. Hamilton, I'm curious, man. Like, so you're, as a master shaman, you're pouring. Some of us who've been to ayahuasca ceremonies, you'll know, like, traditionally, like, depends on, I guess, what culture, but you come up and you take a little drink of the ayahuasca. As a master shaman, what's it like in your shoes as these people drink? The invisible world opens up. I know it's probably evolved a long time now. I know that there's a lower fourth astral world, where there's disembodied energies and entities, and there's also the ability to perhaps lift. So what are you seeing when I'm just curious, like, from your shoes, as people are starting to drink, you're in the master shaman role, you're sitting there, you're holding the space for them. What's going through for you as a master shaman, holding that space for the ayahuasca ceremony as the ceremony begins?
Yeah, as the ceremony begins, it's a hybridization of all those different realms at the same time. So based on your state of consciousness, you're in one of those realms already. So if you have 30 people in the room, all those realms are being represented at the beginning of ceremony, and you know it going in. And it's your responsibility, when you're trained, to know of those realms and be able to understand where the person is without drinking. So you have to kind of know the playing field that we're going into. And I created a practice that I call sanctuary to stabilize the totality of the field so that we could all just go into one place together that could ultimately hold all of the nature of those different realms. But when you know that you're going in to a big ceremony and you're going to work with 20 to 40 people at the same time, you just know that all of that spirit's going to be there, all of it, and so you're ready for it, and you start to see it. And as the ayahuasca starts to take effect, and you see people start to open up to the fact that they've been in this state the whole time, I just think of it as like go time. You start to guide and direct the nature of the space, and you learn how to do that to provide safety and contain the energies, start to tease out the spirits and the entities that are going to ultimately be released, start to bring in the energies and the medicine forms that are going to support the nature of that. And I think of it as like go time. I think it's one of the most sacred, incredible periods of time. And if you can hold that field stable for everybody, which is your role, then everybody just kind of starts to go into it, become aware that this great other is part of us, has always been part of us. It's why little kids talk to the imaginary field. It's always been part of us, to become aware of it. And you just have to be ready to handle all of the energies that are there. What I love about
Yeah.
Sanctuary is that it stabilizes the field and allows you to have all of your tools available at the same time. And so you just start to manage and filter and support and guide everybody into the experience, knowing that you're protected and that you have enough support to be able to handle everything in the room. And little by little, we're going to get to it.
Yeah. So I guess it's kind of a two-part question here. Probably in your early training days, before you were applying Sanctuary, there was probably a different kind of where everybody was kind of in their own spirit, or there's a lower fourth astral involved, perhaps. And for me, I'm always like, yo, like cool, like whatever, nothing's good or bad, but like whatever modality you use, like where is the best healing, like not the best, the after effect of the healing, what is that, like, of the integration? That's what I'm really, is the person kinder, is the person more free, is the person right? And so can you kind of walk us through from the early days of kind of probably what most of the Amazon are doing? They're not invoking Sanctuary, or in most plant medicine ceremonies around the world. So, and what the after effect of that, just kind of allowing the normal organic process to unfold versus when you started calling Sanctuary. And then I would also love to hear a little bit more about like how you invoke Sanctuary. And if I'm understanding correctly, that's an umbrella of a field where the whole can enter into, where all of your higher self is available. And it sounds like you're almost surrounding it with a blanket of protection and light and in a higher dimensional space. I'm not sure, but would love to learn more about how you invoke Sanctuary, and then also what you've noticed when you just allow people to go through their own process with all the energies versus when you invoke Sanctuary. What's the after effect?
Yeah. When you go into all the energies, so we're going sort of like your typical ayahuasca ceremony that's out there. And basically, the first division is what we talked about. Does the person know what they're doing holding it or not? And if they don't, I can guarantee that there's something from any one of those realms that's now running that ceremony. So first of all, there's something or someone running the ceremony. So if it's not a human that you can point to, you better watch out for who's running that ceremony. That's the first thing. Most typically, who you'll find running the ceremony is whatever spirit gave that person who's untrained permission. And they'll say, oh, I was told that I can hold ceremony. And then you just have to ask, by who were you told? And you go find out. And that's the person or the being or entity that's now running that ceremony. So you want to first watch for that. What happens is that it all is unleashed at the same time. And like you said, in that realm, there's a big conflict going on. Call it a war, call it untamed energies, call it vying for attention and the human creative egoic space, call it like the intensity of spirit and God. It's just on. And you have to filter it. So if you know what you're doing, you're filtering it in real time, meaning in 4D, stable, calling forth spirit and knowing how to manage that matrix, remove the spirits and entities within everybody that is causing the suffering, the illnesses, and the problems. Protect everybody through that field the entire time. Bring in all of the medicine patterns and energies, which are found in the fractals. They're found in different kinds of entities themselves. You'll hear different kinds of doctors being referred to. That's all part of the pantheon of medicine down here. That's just understood as plant spirit medicine. And when they're talking about spirit, they're like, yeah, the spirit of that tree is a doctor, the spirit of that plant's a doctor, the spirit of that animal's a doctor, and you see them in vision, or the spirit of that light being or that cosmic being is a doctor. They come into the ceremony, they provide healing and transformation for people. And you as the shaman have the role to know them and usher them into the room, have them work for periods of time, bring them back out of the space. And all of that's part of your training. If you don't know how to do that, I honestly don't know how you can manage an ayahuasca ceremony. I think it's just kind of like up for the roll of the dice. And you would be lucky if you came out better than you went in. You go through all of that. You filter the space for hours. It's high energy. It takes a lot out of the practitioner. Like you get trained to hold the energy and that frequency for that amount of time. It's your responsibility to provide the protections for the entire room. It's your responsibility to filter the spirits and to use different kinds of entities and energies for that purpose. You have to know how to work with the various plants to be able to sustain it. And ultimately, on the other side of that, you have to learn how to be able to like protect everybody's energy as everybody's energy closes down over the next 3 days. So it's one ceremony, and it's the next 3 days that they process, that you have to be aware of how to protect them during that period of time. If all of that goes well, then you have a situation where a person has had a huge release, purge, transformation, and real healing will take place. That healing will seed within them. And to your point about integration, I think it's for a week of ayahuasca or for a full treatment, it's at 6 months to a year of integration before somebody's going to come to a place of like now new normal, new truly stable. And during that period of time, you have to be aware of your energy. You continue to work with your intentions. You get transformed through the dream time. So while you're sleeping, the spirit and the energy keeps working with you, and you become more aware of it when you're in that hypnagogic transitional state. And during that time, I always recommend a lot of relaxation, a lot of hydration, a lot of grounding, and just letting this process unfold. The metaphor I use is those like snow globes. You come into it in one configuration, you shake it up a lot, you take a lot of stuff out of it, you put a lot of new stuff in it, and little by little over months, it settles down energetically within you from the higher dimensional vibrations all the way down into the 3D corporal. And yeah, that's how you do it.
Yeah, and I hope you guys heard that, and you're putting context to this, right? Because if your shaman doesn't know how to do that, right, and whoever gave your shaman permission to do that, like these are important questions you might want to ask, right? Because that was a lot that he just said. You got to usher them in, you got to hold the space, you got to 3 days after, you got to protect them, you got to know, you know what I mean? And that's why it's 10 years of training at least, right? And not 1 out of 100 are chosen or whatever, right? So yeah, with that, for me, when I'm going into that space, I want to make sure that my shaman knows what they're doing. Hamilton, can you walk us a little bit through? And I remember vaguely when I listened to a podcast, this was years ago, but I listened to, you were one of the first shamans, and correct me if I'm wrong, that you started using like white magic only. And I could be wrong. I don't want to call it white magic. Call it whatever you will. Is that your way of invoking sanctuary, and what does that really mean, and how is that different than the normal practice in the Amazon?
Sanctuary was a creation that came about in 2016, 17, 18. And I just recently started sharing it with people after many years of testing it to make sure that by truly the dictionary definition, it's a sanctuary, which means a place of refuge and safety. And a lot of what we've talked about is about the dangers and where we don't have that place of safety. And after, I don't know, at that time, it was 15, 16 years, I was tired of knowing that we were trying to create safety, but we ourselves didn't even have total safety. Right. And so I wanted total safety for ourselves as practitioners and for the people that were in ceremony with us. And so I wanted safety for our consciousness. I wanted to be a true refuge, a place that we come to from this war that we're in, and have like a safe tree, like Avatar, like home tree, or like when we were kids and we played tag, we would have like the timeout tree. I was like, we need a place that we can time out from this like consciousness conflict that we're in, and just catch a breather and have it be in plant medicine and have it be amazing. And so I started to look for universal states, and I was, that we know of, one of the first practitioners or shamans to really be interested in this idea of pure medicine, or real direct communion with source all the time, and have it really be about positive things and just not the battle all the time. So I first, got really interested in this idea of just a medicine world, a place where it's all medicine, it's all healing, it's all good for our spirit. We're protected and safe from the negatives. And then I was looking for something that was even beyond just a medicine world, but an actual, like I say, by definition, sanctuary, a place where we could also just relax into it and let go and be safe. And it's ultimately created through the recognition and the union that the lower and higher dimensional states are here. And when we recognize that, we can go to the higher dimensional states, which is where we know our connection with source, creation, creator, universe, God, where we know that connection and we can find that within ourselves, that we can root in that in ourselves, and we can co-create a state. And it uses 5 simultaneous states of transformation to maintain itself, which is healing, harmonization or harmonizing, balancing, grounding, and the reorienting of our consciousness. So it's simultaneous healing, simultaneous balancing, simultaneous harmonizing, simultaneous grounding, and orienting. And when we have that in the co-creation with Source, we create protection and safety, and we create the ability to heal. And each simultaneous piece works with the other. So as we're harmonizing things, we balance. As we get ungrounded, we ground. As we ground, we reorient. And the combination of that allows for us to create a sanctuary. And so I made that the cornerstone and foundation of our practice. And it's the way I practice all plant medicines. And it's been revolutionary since I've started practicing with others over the last couple of years.
Awesome. That resonates. And so when you invoke the sanctuary in the ayahuasca ceremony, are you finding like the healing is, I don't know, like deeper or more profound or like more group oriented or?
All of the above. First of all, I found that we could give some of the responsibility of how we hold the space to novices, which was impossible before that. So I teach them how we're going to create sanctuary together. And the first action of helping hold the space so that we really are doing it together, not just a recipient of what the shaman's doing, is to learn how to ground in ayahuasca. So, you know, you'll commonly see in ceremonies that aren't grounded, one person purges, 2, 3, and then the whole room goes. And then once the whole room goes, some people start to act out what would sound like kind of hysterics or crazy, and that starts to take over. You know, and a lot of other people get into it. This has allowed, sanctuary has allowed people to, 1 or 2 go into that and everyone else grounds and just starts to shut it down. And then others go into it and then ground. And the same thing with heavy purging. That was the first piece of it. The second was that people were in a much calmer state. And instead of getting into an ecstatic state of fear, they were starting to get into a receptive state where we could start to turn fear off. And when we could do that, it turned out that we could actually use more medicine and more actual ayahuasca. So the dosage was able to go up and people were able to stay a lot more cohesive through that process. So instead of smaller doses, we were actually able to use a little bit larger dose. And that just gets, you know, more of the transformative properties in, especially on that part that I described as kind of psychiatric. So people were able to tolerate more plant medicine in a positive way. The next piece of it was the depth of vision people or medicine experiences people were able to have. There was more clarity in the communication, less hysterics, less chaos, more awareness of the energies that were in them, and more awareness of that conscious, subconscious, unconscious mind that we described. And then that leads to a natural greater ability to move those energies as you become more aware of them. And so people were now starting to describe, you know, the ability to purge those energies in an even deeper way than was there before. And so each way kind of just added to the other. And the only thing that was less chaos, less fear, and less description of being overwhelmed by those dark or you know, lower fourth dimensional states.
Yeah, and I love that. And so for me, I'm kind of like piggybacking off of that. It's like, because like eventually you figure out like, oh, my whole life is a ceremony, and there's like a lot of these like communities trying to pop up, and you know, how can we apply these principles into the communities, right? So that when 1, 2 becomes ungrounded and it's functioning almost like a organism that is like all interconnected as if it was a ceremony. And I feel like that's really going to be the key for a lot of these communities to prosper instead of fall apart.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, we're on the dawn of the biggest disrupt in history that we know of. It's already started, and it's part consciousness, it's part the evolution of the human mind, and it's part social, you know, civilization and empire and where it's gotten to, and it's also technology. It's all these pieces together at once. So it's science and technology as well as, and I always hear the arguments piecemeal and this dystopian narrative applied to it. But what I like to think of is just holistic disrupt. This is going to be the biggest, fastest change we have ever had. And it's going to be predicated on everything that we've done over the last 10, 20,000 years as a species. And so when I see that, and I see these emerging emerging communities, emerging cultures that are coming out of it, I'm seeing that there's this need to understand that what we are as community has to evolve. And it has to take into consideration the true collective, which is us as a group, but also the higher dimensional states and the higher spiritual states at the same time. And there has to be the nature of the training associated with that so that people are aware of it and not just making up ideology or concepts about it, but really knowing how to address that. And I think we're on the cusp of that, because I think we're on the cusp of where, for the first time in human history, within the next 10, 20 years, the human body will no longer be the labor force that drives it, the perpetuation of our industry. And so people call it like displacement of jobs, but I actually think of it as the freeing of human energy from food production and the fabrication of other medicines. And so it frees up all this creativity within us to now do something different. And I think that's where we finally become aware of this ascension, because we're not stuck in the toil of every day, but we actually are more liberated from that. And it opens up our consciousness to this greater context that we've been talking about, and as a collective start to address it. And I think that's where our communities actually start to root and flourish. And I think of that as like the second coming of man, or the, when we shift as a species to being more a luminous kind of species instead of, being rooted in these lower dimensional energies.
Yeah, absolutely. I know also that you dabble with crypto. I know you have a project or something like this. Can you talk to us? I know with this great disrupt coming up, a little bit about decentralized finance, about crypto. Well, what are your thoughts on that? Any kind of words of wisdom there?
Love to speak on it. I co-founded a lab called Gaia Labs, and we're a Web3 crypto innovation lab, and got really interested in understanding that this extraordinary network that we see in ceremony was starting to be approximated amongst people wanting an extraordinary way to interact and utilizing computer systems as a way to do that. And so I think the simplest way to understand crypto is the very same need that there was in the world when people first invented money. And they're like, I need a symbol to represent a certain amount of value that I can give you, and you can hold on to, and you could believe in that value for a period of time, and you could give it back to me, and I could believe in that value, because the other systems around me aren't capable of doing that for me right now. And so that's, I think, the dawn of this is utilizing computer systems as a means to be able to do that with each other and give value to things that just weren't being valued. So I think the first thing that you saw was Bitcoin that came into the world, and that's an algorithm that ultimately has value over scarcity, and people are trading Bitcoin, and it's being institutionalized and accepted into the greater traditional finance community now. But like the real cutting edge of crypto is two people deciding to create something of value together and exchange it. And I think that that's what's really important for these communities, and that we're going to see a lot of kinds of microfinance get created within these communities as people step out of a hyper or over industrialized economy, realizing that there isn't any space for them there. They're not there in their spirit. They're not there in a job. They're not there making money to be able to educate their children or feed themselves. Like, all those systems will be completely disrupted on a global scale within the next 20 years. And so when we think about it that way, we see communities being created and a need in a way to be able to share value amongst them. And the best way that we know how to do that as of right now is with crypto, which are basically like tokens. So the best way to think of crypto is a digital bingo token, and or like poker chip, like, it's another symbol for some kind of value. And right now in the world of crypto, what's taking place, and I think is really interesting, is a meme culture. And I say this with, a lot of respect and also caution. Don't go into the meme world if you don't understand it. It's right now hyperinflationary and gamified and gambled and filled with, all sorts of nefarious actors, very much like you would have thought of the Old West, like the earliest casinos and poker houses and cheating and all this stuff going on. Like, that's where it is in its infancy right now. But the infrastructure inside Web3 has finally grown to transcend traditional finance in its entirety. And in this market cycle right now, it's the first time that there's between 500 billion and $1 trillion in the world being traded over the symbolism of cartoons and memes. So people, communities getting behind memes and utilizing decentralized exchanges and these liquidity pools to put value in and take value out and share and trade value amongst communities. People are taking what would be considered hard-earned cash and speculating in these hyperinflationary markets. And while they do that, I'm really a technologist. And so I'm looking at it from the perspective of how does this technology ultimately serve these communities that we're talking about down the road? Well, it serves them because one community could be over in what we call North America, another community could be in South America, another community could be in East Asia, and they could go to a decentralized exchange that no one owns, that people are maintaining, and actually trade value amongst each other and utilize communication software to know each other and do things that were never possible before in terms of finance. And so that really is Web3 and crypto, and it's going to go through continuous evolutions. And as it does, a new financial system and ecosystem will be born.
Yeah. And so, kind of like a vision that I have, and I'm kind of an idealist, kind of a dreamer, but it's like, I think, like an underground mycelial network that is all kind of interconnected, like an underground internet. And that's how the trees communicate. And also, like when one, I don't know, like is needing nutrients, it seems like they're all connected down there, and like they'll send nutrients without even thinking about it to the person who needs nutrients. And so I'm like, as below, so above. It's like, how can we create like almost like a network of communities that are somehow unique but all interconnected and somehow supporting each other and communicating on, whether it's on Web3 or through some type of decentralized platform, which is going to kind of give the power back to the people. But not only that, like in future generations, people can come to Earth and explore and play and create in a system that is not like set up. I think the key is like there's so many other communities popping up. How can we like strategize to organize? Is this going to happen naturally where it's like all of these centers start interconnecting somehow, or do we need to start with one platform?
No, I think that it's the way you describe it, it's mycelial. And, even in the mycelium networks, there's some areas that just build out faster. They have more nutrients there to grow, or the environment's better for it at that time. I think we have to accept that. And I really love how you are like bringing forth the idea of biology to technology, because that's how I got interested. Like I was envisioning the forest as this great decentralized network of communication, this field of energy that grows out of itself and regenerates itself. And it's constantly evolving and changing and sharing, as you describe. And then I came to this technology that's trying to do the same thing, only the technology is doing it in a really rudimentary form. It's so early. I mean, it's only been around since 2009, 2010. So it's in the earliest form of it. If we fast forward with AI, 10, 20 years, there is the ability all of a sudden for many platforms to cross communicate, interact with each other, share value amongst them, and core infrastructure is being built for that. I'm co-founder of a project called Landslide that is bringing the bridging capacities to many different of these isolated environments. So there's right now many blockchain environments that are truly isolated. I mean, worse isolated right now than you would think of as like Windows computers and Apple computers, or the iPhone and Androids. Like these things don't talk at all. They use different tooling. It's all been repeated. There are groups that are working on these middle layer infrastructure to actually get them to all talk, get the communities to start to know each other, share projects across the communities. That layer is now being built and we're involved in it. So because of that, I'm aware of what's going on in that space. Let it happen. Just let it happen. Let it happen in this way. They're ultimately going to grow together. And when they do, the nature of the sharing economy will be built enough to allow for it. But right now we're still in this hyper competitive environment, and so it doesn't allow for it. But the beauty that I see in AI technologies is that AI technologies are going to disrupt that. Like, get ready. This is the last current swan song of 5,000-10,000 years of evolution to this point. right? And AI, not in its current form, AI in its current form is very young. The AI innovators are saying, watch out in a year or two. They're like, yeah, between 2027 and 2030, watch out. So wait until that moment. That disrupts everything. And when that disrupt comes, we want to be ready for it. And we want to be ready to work with that technology to unite this greater network that currently is figuring itself out. And when that happens, it'll be time for us to bring forth a new understanding of being humane, which transcends greed and predatory behavior, to creating a new form of infrastructure about how we got here in the first place, which was sharing food and sharing resources. Right? It's only in the now fourth industrial revolution, hyper industrialization, that there's this massive, massive polarization of wealth that's being created. Well, that's not sustainable because we're one species and it's one earth. Right? It's fine when you have these divisive narratives and polarization, but that comes like a bungee cord snapping back to the middle. And when it does, we want to be ready with the infrastructure to support that and support the next civilization that comes out of it. And if you're, heart-centered and you found that in the medicine and in the awakening of your consciousness, you want to be ready to participate in that. So I think of this as a time of great preparation for the next 5 years. And in the next 5 years, we want to be ready to usher in that next part of the evolution of the world.
Absolutely. And I think like 2230 is such an interesting year that a lot of people are kind of throwing out there, and dare to prepare for what's to come. And it's coming. And any practical steps, Hamilton, for like the average 9-to-5er out in America right now who might be hearing this and they're like, okay, well, how do I prepare for what's about to come? I mean, first of all, go have a journey, connect to your spirit, perhaps step number one. But other than that, any other practical stuff like financially, how to prepare for what's about to come?
Absolutely. So the very first thing I think we need to do is, this is the time when we need to get really aligned with the universe. So we need a much bigger context and container for what's about to happen. So I think when we get universally aligned, we're with the great forces that are changing everything all the time. So first, develop a deep connection with whatever you call the source of this universe. Call it God, call it the universe itself, whatever you're tapped into, whatever brought us all here. Let's get aligned with that first. And the second thing is, in that alignment, let's learn how to turn off our fear about what's coming, because the fear mindset before we get into a time of great change are never the same. Think about it on a micro scale. When you were going to go into that conversation later that day that you don't want to have, and you're there churning in your mind about it, it's never the way it is in your head when you get in the conversation. Ever. So we don't want to do that in our head. So we want to learn to shut that down. Having some plant medicine experiences, I think, are key to opening up to what's out there, but safe ones. So we've really, brought home that point. Find the safe ones. If you'd like to come to us, you're more than welcome to. We would love to have you come experience what we're talking about. And if you resonate with what I'm sharing, please come and visit us, because I always say that's the number one thing. There are good groups out there. Find the one you resonate with, because they're aligned in vibe with you and energy. The next thing I think we need to do is open up to learn about these technologies, right? Like, we need to learn about Web3, because even right now, the central banks are designing central bank digital currencies. So even if you think like, oh, that's some, weird technology, it's not going to happen to us, it's happening at what will be a federal level. So if we understand that, we need to get comfortable with this technology, start learning the terminology about it. You don't want to be late to the game about that. Learn what a crypto wallet is, learn about what digital currency is, learn about some of these economic opportunities that are out there. Like, I can't give financial advice because I'm not a financial advisor, but the number one, and this isn't financial advice, the number one performing asset since 2010 is Bitcoin. So mind blowing, the number one performing asset, and why traditional finance is interested in it is because it's growing like crazy. And then I would say, guys, the next generation was born with Bitcoin. Like it won't be an anomaly for them. Just like we weren't born with the internet and we now have it. Every generation after us was born with the internet. It's not an anomaly for them. It's not a new thing. So digital assets are here to stay. Get comfortable with digital finance and digital assets. And then the next thing is to get understanding about AI, because AI is never leaving the economy now. So it's not robots that are terminators. You know, maybe that happens in the future, maybe it doesn't. We don't know. But what it is now is the automation of robots. Right. So what we're really talking about is how we go from we do all the jobs to robots do all the jobs. And this is the thing that links it. And so I'll give you an example. Okay. A really simple example. If you have a social media feed, the way you have one is AI. And if you use a smartphone keyboard, the way you do it is AI. So you've been using AI for years without knowing it. Right. Now, if you go to San Francisco, you're going to find self-driving cars that are taxis now. The way they do that is AI. You can't do it without AI. So this just means mass automation. So when mass automation happens, that frees up a lot of energy for a lot of other things. So I want you to look at where you are in the economy. Are you going to be phased out by automation? If you are, start getting trained for something else that doesn't get phased out by automation, right? Like that's coming. And just so you know, someone would say, oh, you know, you're lucky, you're a shaman, you're not going to be phased out. There are many groups coming to me to want to create shaman AIs, therapist AI, psychiatrist AI, plant medicine guide AIs already. So they're looking to phase out every service industry that exists. So it's, you know, don't think that we're quote protected or safe from that at all. We want to be ready for it. This is not build a bunker and get a bunch of guns. This is about becoming educated, turning our fear off, and finding community that we want to be in. And the final piece of it is we're going to see a lot of self-sufficient communities get born. And if that resonates with you, start to look for them. They're forming. And this is like where people with wealth are going to come together and buy big land and put a community on it for people to live. And it'll grow its own food and have its own energy and use solar and wind and microhydro and things like that. And people are going to start to opt out of what is the hyper-industrialized space because there's less room for humans in it. And it'll still be controlled by a minority, less than 0.1% of the population. So, you know, just understand this big shift is coming. Let's not be scared of it. Let's get educated and let's group together around how to thrive during this time. There will be a lot of time to thrive.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Dare to prepare. Cool. And on that note, I think education is such a huge part of this. And so I see, you know, I know you're doing Blue Morpho Academy. Can you tell us a little bit about Blue Morpho Academy, why you set it up and what it is?
Thanks. Yeah. Blue Morpho Academy is a joy of mine. I'm the founder of it. And I set it up for the purpose of training people in the arts that we're talking about, in the plant medicine arts and the consciousness arts, because when I looked at this great psychedelic renaissance that was happening, and just to give it some perspective, we're talking right now tens of millions to hundreds of millions of psilocybin being put out into the world, tens of millions to hundreds of millions of doses of ketamine a year. Already 4 million doses of ayahuasca last year were experienced globally. As this grows, we're going to start to see, you know, close to 1 billion doses a year collectively of these, mind-changing experiences. And when I looked at that as a movement, I said, okay, it's not a lack of production over the substances and sacred agriculture to not sacred agriculture, et cetera, that is going to be the issue. The stick point is human resource around it. If less than 1% wants to have a human support through this experience, there aren't enough trained people in the world. And we're talking about all these shamans popping up all over without training. I said, we need to differentiate ourselves as a community now, just like when we went from everyone's a doctor at home to there need to be some people that are licensed as doctors. Like there need to actually be some people here who are certified to know and be able to show that they know and demonstrate that they know what they're talking about in this space. And so I created Blue Morpho Academy to create that. And I know there are many others out in the world doing that too. So I give tremendous gratitude to them as well. And we're one small cog in a much bigger movement that's taking place. But I wanted us to stand for excellence in this field. That if you know that somebody came out of our training, that they'd be trained in safety, dose, the proper way to set up a space, the way to use sanctuary, the way to be able to ensure your safety through the experience, prep you accordingly, make sure that you're checked out and appropriately screened so that you're the right candidate for the kinds of plants that you're going to consume. Help educate you on what that looks like, get you comfortable with the experience, take you through the entirety of the experience, and provide you integration on the other side of it. And so that's the training that everybody goes through in the academy. And those are for our certification programs. And you can come right now and get certified as a sitter coach. And we're just launching now our facilitator training program. So you can come become part of the academy if you want to have deep education and real expertise in this space. You can get educated right now through us and ultimately certified. And that's a way of being able to show others that you've completed our training and that you've been checked out by us, that you really do have the skills necessary to do this for yourself, friends and families, and others well and safely. And then inside the academy as well, we have a mystery school.
For any plant medicine?
We teach psilocybin, ayahuasca, San Pedro Huachuma, and cannabis. And we'll be continuing to add to the trainings.
Cool. Amazing. Yeah. Okay, cool. Good to know. So I just kind of want to jump back over now into a couple of things that I remember from an old podcast that I wanted to, or a conversation that I want to jump into. I love it when you described, I don't remember, I think we were on a phone call when you were talking about when you call on Jesus in the space, in the ayahuasca. I think there's so many people out there that might be curious. Like I remember that you kind of described, can you tell us like some of the experiences you've had in the ayahuasca space and when you call on older bro Jeshua? And then also after this answer, I want to delve a little bit more into what you think about him. So, yeah.
Sure. Happy to speak about, first of all, Jesus for me is one of our ancestors. So I want everyone to understand that Jesus is, for me, a person who walked the earth and lived the earth and was part of, human ancestry, and a very special person. And the beauty of meeting Jesus in the ayahuasca experience is that it transcends belief, because you have the experience itself. You've connected with either Christ consciousness or Jesus himself, our ancestor. And it helps a lot of people get clear about that. A lot of people were raised Christian and don't vibe with it based on their experiences, but they need to bring, some kind of resolution to that within themselves. And funny enough, after 20 years, everybody I know who's met Jesus in ayahuasca comes out liking Jesus. Like no one's like, I don't like Jesus. Everyone is like, hey, Jesus, after meeting Jesus. Like everybody, Jesus has a way of like turning on your heart and your love. Jesus is a master at it. Like everybody comes out going like, yeah, Jesus, like good guy. Glad I met him. And in my case, in the realms with Jesus, I worked a lot with Jesus to deal with those lower vibrational, lower dimensional states within people. And so we were dealing with, really heinous spirits together for many years, ridding people and helping them get rid of those entities within themselves or just within the great cosmic battle. So I've just had a lot of run-ins with Jesus, and I consider him one of my best friends, and so lucky to have been able to develop such a close relationship with him in the astral, in the visionary realms. And so glad that he's had an important impact on humanity. And I would like to see that impact grows in a positive way going forward.
Yeah, absolutely. And I remember you were like telling me like sometimes he comes in different forms, right? Like he'll come in on a rainbow, or he'll come in on. I thought it was funny. Like you're telling me he comes in all these different forms, but I love what you said. Like the after effect is everybody is like, he's love.
Yeah,
you know what
exactly.
I mean?
Yeah, it transforms you at the same time. Like it's not like meeting another person who's like a loving guy and you're like, he's a loving guy. It's like when Jesus shows up in your vision, the love goes in you and it goes like boom inside you, and so you receive his love in a way that you're not like shielded from when it happens. You're not like having to protect yourself from it. And I would like to preface for those who aren't religious or don't identify with a certain religion, I've never met anybody who said, Jesus told me I had to go be part of a religion. So there's been no conversion other than just loving Jesus and receiving that connection like a really incredible friend or guide or support for who we are in our consciousness. And I think that's an important element of it as well.
I think that's huge. And just kind of applying that towards, I think you have a very unique perception because you grew up, I don't know, like in America, and then also, you know, with the Jesus culture, I'm sure you're aware of like the Christian perspective, the, you know, all that perspective and the Bible Belt and all that stuff. And then you came actually to the jungle and you work with Jesus in the visionary fields in the invisible world. And so you have those unique perspectives. What do you want? Is there a message that you like to send to, because probably like there's a lot of people still stuck in this Western culture. Anything you want to say about society and how we can move and evolve from our ingrained, entrained, programmed 3D kind of religious political control system of religion into kind of this new kind of paradigm of, you know, he's a brother, he's a guide, he's a friend.
I think the advice I give is go to Jesus. So I had a conversation with Jesus a long time ago when I didn't get it. And I just didn't get it. And I was really upset. And I was saying to Jesus that I just didn't get it. And I didn't get the darkness and I didn't get the polarity. I didn't get all of it. I just didn't get it. And Jesus said to me, who other than me can be here every day, 24 hours a day, waiting for any soul to come and choose me over the darkness? Period. And I looked at that and I said, well, you know, clearly not me, because I'm not getting it. And I said, like, I got it. And then I got it in that moment. And there's this idea that you turn to Christ, not what other people say about it, not what it represents to anyone else, but you turn to Christ as a form of consciousness of infinite unconditional love. And you resolve within yourself what feels separate, traumatized, hurt, denied, separated from, small, scared. And you have this field, not just a person, a field of support that is bigger than from here to thousands of galaxies. Like this field, it'd be like having the sun on your side. Like you would know it. Like it's this presence that is so powerful. And it's about like, leave the institution, what it is, leave what other people have said for what it is, turn your mind, turn your awareness, and find out for yourself what that represents. It doesn't mean believe, it doesn't mean become part of a religion, but it also means there's no need to deny a great teacher of ours. And then see why there is that teaching. And that would be my recommendation. If you've been boxed in and you know that there's something there for you, look for it that way. And if you don't resonate with Jesus at all, there's a lot of other ancestors as well that can represent teachers for us like that. And so I would say go to them and do the exact same experiment. Turn truly to the teacher and receive and see what happens.
Cool. Love that. There was also another kind of thing that I remember I wanted to just bring up real quick. You know, in Native American cultures, I think they believe that when one, you know, grandmother dies or something like that, and obviously there's no death, is transitioning, they're able to kind of bequeath some of their gifts or some of their healing abilities to their chosen one that they choose in their lineage or whatever. I remember just listening to a podcast where you were kind of talking about when your spiritual teacher transitioned. Can you walk us through what happens in the invisible world when such a great spiritual teacher is transitioning? And how is that process?
Little understood process by us and maximally understood process by other lineages that you can pass on, like a containment of knowledge to the next generation, like a technology. Like I can write a biography and I can give you my book and then I can die. I could create all this data and give it to you and I could die or transition. Like, I don't believe in death either. I only believe in births and transition and or change of state. And they figured out that you could take the knowledge base that one person had and transfer it to another. Just like they figured out that you could take an essence of a tree and bring it into you, you could take the essence of the knowledge, not the spirit of this person, and transfer it, but the knowledge of this person and transfer it. And that you can store the knowledge in that collective field of consciousness. So our ancestors figured that out way before we figured out using, electrical engineering to store information. They figured out you could store information in the matrix of consciousness. And that's exactly what's happening. And I'll never forget, I was at Julio's deathbed days after he had died. And in his chest was this orb of light that I was seeing with 3D eyes. That was pinks and purples and pastels and blues. And it was just going in his chest like this. And I looked over at the person who was going to inherit it. And I said, do you see that? And he goes, yeah, that's the knowledge. And this was 4 p.m, stone cold sober, looking at it. And I was blown away. And there it was. And I saw it transferred into this other person's body. And that's how it gets passed on generation after generation.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Yeah. Oof. Okay. All right, Hamilton. Man, just last question here. We're kind of heading into this, like you said, this really important, unique, rapid changing, catalytic time in human inflection point in humanity's history. What is kind of your vision for humanity? What do you see? Obviously, you're playing your part. You're training people. You're doing the medicine. You're holding space for people. You're building new crypto, mechanisms. So you're doing your part. But what do you see as the best case scenario here that we can emerge together as humanity? Your vision for the new Earth, perhaps.
The vision of the new Earth is first a recognition that we must have a great transformation of our current systems. So this is not a revolution. This is an evolution on our current systems. And then we need to understand that in evolving our systems, all the limitations that we were facing before vanish. So don't think the Earth is overpopulated with 8 billion people. It could have 100 billion people or 200 billion people if we change the nature of how we do everything. We have to become one with technology. There's a merged state of consciousness that appears. We have to move into the merged state from the egoic state of everyone being focused on me, me, me. We transcend greed. It's not about having more. You can't have more. You're made of the universe. You don't need more stuff. There's going to be more stuff than you can imagine. We're going to hyper produce stuff. So this idea of I need my stuff goes away. We become heart-centered and balanced in our brain for the first time ever in history. Not just our great spiritual teachers, but we do. The rainbow body that we all know about energetically turns on collectively. This happens in little pockets, and then it ultimately becomes the known way of being, which is the harmonization of our mystical teachings from the last 10,000 years until now, but now hybridized with what we think of as like modern technology. We have free energy production. We learn how to use the energy, not steal energy to go spend energy. We learn how to create energy. And as we create energy, we have unlimited energy. And we see lifespans go a lot longer. We change the nature of how we create food production and medicine. We get past the idea of people being products. People won't be products anymore for anything. And so you won't be the product of an industrialized military or medical complex. There won't be a need for it. So we become much more humane in our humanity, and we won't have the same need that we have for war because there won't have to be the same need over control of resources. And so, things that were distant concepts like alchemy start to become real, and we start to have the ability to create in such an efficient nature with the help of automation and robotics that we didn't have before, that we really do usher in a renaissance. And it's that heart consciousness mixed with, intelligence consciousness from this idea of more balanced communities that start to represent that and present that to the world, that becomes the foundation for this evolution. And in doing so, we change everything. We change architecture and engineering. We change economic structures and political structures. We evolve all of those. And ultimately, people just don't see the need for the matrix that they were part of. They just don't resonate with it anymore. And, just like a lot of people don't feel they need a mailman to send a message anymore. You used to need a mailman to send a message. Now you can send a message through your phone, right? But you need a phone. Well, pretty soon, your phone will just be a like latent technology that used to exist, and you'll have even something better than that. So as we embrace that, I think that's the future, and that's the one I want to help create.
Absolutely, brother. Any last words? Anything else coming through that you want to share with the audience?
I would just say, if you hear a dystopian narrative, know that that's propaganda, and turn it off and become part of the solution and get thriving on that. It's a fun ride, and this is the greatest time in history to be alive that we know of. And let's collectively learn how to support each other and love each other and have an incredible time being alive. And like I like to share with people on our groups, I say, we're going to know each other for billions of years. So let's learn how to be brothers and sisters now, because we're in this for billions of years. It's not like I got to survive this guy for 10 years. We're going to know each other forever. So until we, deal with our problems and our lower vibrational states, we're just going to perpetuate this. So let's take that expanded timeline and start to do something phenomenal with it.
Absolutely, brother. So guys, if you guys want to find Hamilton's work, we're going to link everything on the show notes. Blue Morpho. If you're feeling called for a ayahuasca ceremony, the Academy's training, and they're going to do a facilitator training as well. And, my friend just went down there and just said, I'm just hearing beautiful things of the work going down there. So, all right, guys, till next time. Thanks for being on the show, Hamilton. All right. We'll see you guys next time. Peace, peace, peace.